Hey guys, tonight we slip back nearly 2,000 years into a world where the Roman Empire stretched from the misty marshes of Britain all the way down to the sun-blazed deserts of Egypt. And we're not just looking at battles or marble statues. No, tonight we're creeping into bedrooms. Yes, Roman imperial bedrooms, where power, paranoia, and surprisingly fluffy pillows all came together. Imagine soft lamplight dancing on frescoed walls, perfumes in the air, and maybe a servant or two pretending not to notice the emperor's snoring. You're here now, and you probably won't survive this, because let's be honest, one wrong step in an emperor's private quarters, and you'd vanish faster than a senator's moral integrity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing who's listening around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a hallway lit with flickering candles, each flame bending toward you, as if curious about this midnight visitor. The floor under your bare feet is cool marble, faintly veined with patterns like rivers frozen in stone. You push past a heavy curtain of crimson fabric, and suddenly, you're standing in the sleeping quarters of Augustus, the very first emperor of Rome. The room is not quite what you expect. It isn't the over-the-top palace fantasy you might have imagined from Hollywood epics. Instead, Augustus preferred moderation, at least compared to some of the lunatics who would follow him. The bed is wooden, carved but not gilded, its frame draped in sheets dyed soft shades of purple and red. There's a faint scent of oil lamps and beeswax polish, reminding you that even emperors had to put up with smoke in their lungs at bedtime. On a low table beside the bed, you see a polished bronze mirror, catching the flame of a lamp and multiplying it into a golden shimmer across the walls. Next to it lies a wax tablet, half scratched with notes about laws, grain shipments, and a reminder, possibly scribbled by a secretary, that he needs to speak to Agrippa in the morning. Imagine drifting off to sleep while your bedside to-do list includes secure Egypt and rearrange Senate seating. You notice a small shelf with scrolls rolled tightly, some marked with red string. Augustus was known for reading late at night, especially Greek literature. Historians still argue whether he genuinely enjoyed Homer or just liked showing off his cultured side. Either way, the man clearly understood the value of a bedtime story. And honestly, you get the sense he would have been that annoying friend who insists on reading philosophy aloud when all you want is to lie in silence. As you wander closer to the bed, you notice something unexpected. The sheets are faintly perfumed. Romans loved to sprinkle petals or dabbed oils into their linens. A quirky tidbit here. The wealthy sometimes kept sachets of powdered iris root under their pillows, partly for fragrance, partly because they believed it warded off bad dreams. Augustus, careful about omens and appearances, probably embraced such rituals. There's a certain charm to imagining the most powerful man in the Mediterranean whispering, "No nightmares tonight, please," before tucking himself in. And then the walls. They aren't bare. You see frescoes painted in delicate colors, scenes of myth, landscapes, maybe even half-naked gods leaning on clouds. It's more dreamscape than decoration. The Romans believed that art, like fragrance, could shape the mood of a room. Sleep wasn't just a biological need. It was an aesthetic experience. You can picture Augustus walking in, exhaling after a day of diplomacy and scheming, and letting those painted skies trick him into a softer state of mind. Still, despite the calm, you sense a hum of anxiety under the surface, because being emperor was the most dangerous job in the world. Augustus never forgot that Julius Caesar, his adoptive father, had been stabbed to death in broad daylight, which meant the bedroom wasn't just about relaxation. It was also about safety. Guards lingered just outside the curtains, armored but silent, ready to wake him if something shifted in the night. You notice mirrors placed at odd angles, catching glints of lamplight, perhaps practical, perhaps symbolic, a reminder that every shadow could hide a blade. The irony is that Augustus preached moderation, but his private comforts reveal just how carefully he balanced simplicity and control. The bed isn't overloaded with gold, but every detail, the fragrance, the frescoes, the guards, reminds you that this isn't an ordinary citizen's room. Even in sleep, the emperor had to perform the role of emperor. You catch yourself chuckling softly. Imagine if you tried bringing a Roman imperial bedroom into your modern apartment. Perfumed sheets would be nice, sure. But a wax tablet full of government memos? A couple of guards looming outside your bedroom door? That's the kind of overkill your landlord might frown on. As Augustus pulls a blanket over himself, woven of fine wool, not too heavy, you sense the mixture of vulnerability and power. Here lies the man who commanded legions, reorganized the state, and declared peace across the Mediterranean. And yet he's still a human being adjusting his pillow, scratching his leg, maybe even whispering a little prayer that tomorrow will go smoothly. There's something oddly comforting in realizing that no matter how high you climb in history, you still have to figure out how to get a good night's sleep. And so, as the candles gutter and the emperor's breathing steadies, you linger in the corner of this quiet room. You feel the rhythm of Rome itself, ambition, caution, and the deep human craving for rest. You imagine yourself curling up on a spare cushion, drifting into dreams while history turns in its sleep just beside you. You slip quietly away from Augustus' perfumed sheets, leaving behind the flicker of lamp flames and the faint smell of iris root. The corridor ahead feels cooler, less adorned, as though the very palace knows you are about to enter a different kind of dream space. The air grows heavier, touched with the salty dampness of an island breeze. You find yourself walking toward Capri, that sun-bleached retreat where Augustus' successor, Tiberius, made his strange nest of comfort and control. The first thing that strikes you as you enter is how much darker it feels. Augustus loved moderation, a balance between plain wood and purple linens, but Tiberius, well, he had his own rules. Here, the windows are smaller, narrow slits that admit just enough moonlight to paint silver across the marble floor. A heavy bed dominates the chamber, its frame inlaid with gold and ivory, covered with thick quilts that gleam faintly like molten sunlight frozen into fabric. They look cozy enough, but at the same time, the sheer weight of them feels like you're being smothered under empire itself. You step closer, curious about the pillows. Not soft down, not simple wool. These are carved marble headrests. Yes, marble. You run your fingers across the cold, polished surface, wondering how anyone could fall asleep with their neck propped on a miniature slab of architecture. But then you remember Roman elites believe in hard surfaces as a kind of discipline, even luxury. To them, a marble pillow wasn't punishment, it was prestige. Sleep like the gods, on stone. Historians still argue whether Tiberius genuinely preferred this ascetic posture, or whether he just wanted to impress his guests with "see how tough I am" bedtime aesthetics. And yet, next to those marble supports are cushions, softer, stuffed with feathers and wool, dyed a deep imperial purple. Maybe he wasn't all stone and iron. Maybe even Tiberius, feared for his paranoia and cruelty, liked to sink into softness after pretending to be granite all day. A silver tray rests on a stand beside the bed. The lamp's glow reveals cups of engraved metal, delicate handles shaped like curling vines. You lean close, and a faint scent lingers, wine diluted with herbs. Romans were cautious about drinking pure wine. It was considered barbaric, too strong. So Tiberius sipped his nightly cup watered down, often infused with honey or poppy seeds to ease the mind towards sleep. A quirky tidbit here. Some emperors even added lettuce juice to their bedtime drinks, convinced it made dreams gentler. You picture Tiberius, the ruler of the world, grimacing at a cup of salad-flavored wine, just because tradition told him it was good for bedtime. The room itself seems sparse at first, but as your eyes adjust, you notice small luxuries tucked away. A low table of polished cedar holds tiny figurines, perhaps offerings to household gods, or maybe just toys left from his youth. There's even the soft rustle of movement in the corner, and when you turn, you spot a small cage. Inside, a bird blinks at you, feathers puffed, ready to tuck its head under its wing. Yes, emperors had pets in their bedrooms too. Suetonius tells us Tiberius had a particular fondness for exotic creatures, and the idea of a bird singing him to sleep isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Imagine drifting off with the ruler of Rome while a sparrow chirps lullabies in the background. But even here, comfort doesn't come without caution. Guards are stationed outside, their sandals shuffling on stone. Tiberius was deeply suspicious of betrayal. Maybe rightly so, considering how many daggers lurked in Roman politics. You notice that the walls themselves are unusually thick, built to muffle sound from outside. The doorframe looks reinforced, almost like the bedroom doubles as a vault. This wasn't just a place for sleeping, it was a bunker. And in the middle of this strange blend of softness and suspicion, you see the man himself, or rather, you imagine him. Tiberius lies stiffly on the bed, wrapped in golden quilts, the marble pillow beneath his neck like a reminder that power is cold. His face, lined and heavy from years of both command and fear, softens slightly as his breathing deepens. Maybe he dreams of battles won. Maybe he dreams of betrayal. Maybe he dreams of lettuce. What's fascinating is how Roman writers couldn't resist making Tiberius' bedroom into a stage for gossip. Whispered stories of secret vices, hidden pleasures, or endless paranoia were passed down like bedtime horror tales. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect reality or simply the Senate's favorite pastime, slandering emperors they couldn't control. For you, though, tonight, the room itself feels oddly calm. The cold marble, the faint wine fragrance, the quilted gold, it all adds up to a comfort that's heavy, almost suffocating, but undeniably Roman. You glance at the ceiling. Painted panels stretch above you, decorated with tiny golden stars on a dark blue background. A false night sky hovers over the emperor's dreams, as though he sleeps under eternity itself. It's both beautiful and a little claustrophobic. You imagine him staring at those stars before drifting off, asking himself whether they look down in approval or judgment. You chuckle softly. If you tried marble pillows at home, your chiropractor would probably block your number. And if you served lettuce wine at a party, you'd lose friends quickly. Yet here, in this chamber, those oddities make sense. Because being emperor meant nothing was simple, not even sleep. Every detail had to balance luxury with suspicion, comfort with performance. As the bird in the corner settles, fluffing its feathers into silence, and the guards outside shift their weight, you realize that Tiberius' bedroom is less about rest and more about survival. Still, the emperor breathes evenly, chest rising and falling beneath the heavy quilt. Whatever storms await him tomorrow, for now, the night holds. And so you linger, watching the empire dream on golden fabric, your own eyelids heavy under the imagined weight of marble pillows and quiet paranoia. You slip out of Tiberius' golden, suffocating quilts and cold marble pillows, padding softly down another corridor. The air feels charged now, as if every flicker of torchlight is whispering gossip ahead of you. You push aside a curtain of heavy purple, and there it is, the chamber of Caligula. A room where extravagance, indulgence, and paranoia crawl into bed together like unwelcome bedfellows. The first impression is blinding. Every surface glints. The walls shimmer with sheets of beaten gold, polished so brightly you can see your own sleepy reflection staring back in distorted waves. Torches double and triple in those golden ripples until it feels like the room is alive with fire. Draperies cascade from the ceiling, dyed a deep imperial purple, the shade reserved for emperors alone. It's as though the very air has been woven into fabric and dyed to prove a point. In the middle of it all, you see the bed. Not just a bed, an altar, elevated on a platform of ivory. Its posts are carved into serpentine forms, snakes coiling upward, as though guarding their master's dreams. The sheets shimmer like liquid silk, dyed in alternating shades of purple and scarlet, trimmed with fine gold thread. The quilt looks so heavy it might crush a lesser mortal. But for Caligula, it's just the right weight to remind him that he's wrapped in Rome's wealth every night. You notice something odd at the foot of the bed, a small golden chair, more like a throne than a piece of bedroom furniture. This wasn't just a spot to toss sandals. No, Caligula supposedly used it for nightly audiences. Imagine being summoned half asleep to stand beside his bed, while he lounged in silk sheets and delivered commands between yawns. Historians still argue whether these late-night meetings really happened, or whether later writers were exaggerating to make him look even more eccentric. Either way, you can picture it. An exhausted senator rubbing his eyes while the emperor, dressed in night clothes embroidered with stars, demanded updates on taxes. The scent in here is different too. Heavier, sweeter, cloying. You glance around and realize that incense burners line the walls, each wafting thick plumes of frankincense and myrrh. The smoke curls lazily toward the ceiling, filling the space with a perfume that is equal parts temple and a suffocating spa. Caligula loved theatricality, and even his sleep was staged. Every inhale and exhale became part of the performance, as though the whole room existed to remind him that he was more than human. Then you catch sight of something smaller, stranger. A delicate cradle sits tucked near the wall, draped in silk as fine as the emperor's sheets. Inside rests a curious little bundle. Not a child, but a pet. Caligula was known for doting on his horses, even building stables of marble. Some stories claim he allowed animals inside his chambers. And looking at that silk-lined cradle, you imagine a miniature dog, or perhaps even a favored bird, snoozing beside the most powerful man in Rome. It's one thing to command legions. It's another to coo at your pet between decrees. And yet, for all this luxury, you sense an edge of unease. Caligula's paranoia leaked into his bedroom. You notice mirrors angled across the walls, not for vanity, but for vigilance. Reflections catch every shadow, every guard's shifting posture outside. A dagger could gleam in any corner, and he wanted to see it coming. It's as if he slept inside a kaleidoscope of suspicion. A silver tray rests by the bed, cups and dishes scattered across it. One cup holds the residue of wine, flecked with herbs. Another dish carries figs, their skins split and glistening under the lamplight. A quirky tidbit: Romans sometimes nibbled figs before bed, believing they aided digestion and promoted sweet dreams. You picture Caligula chewing thoughtfully, deciding whether to eat one more fig or sentence someone to exile. It was that kind of mood. You approach the bed again and notice inscriptions carved into the ivory posts. Tiny words scratched in Greek. Verses from poets, fragments of plays. Caligula was raised in a world of literature, and despite his reputation, he carried a certain love of performance into every corner of his life. Even here, at the threshold of sleep, he surrounded himself with lines meant to echo in his mind. Maybe he whispered them into the silk before closing his eyes, letting theater and empire mingle in his subconscious. He lies there now, at least in your imagination, his chest rising and falling under silk sheets that gleam like molten dusk. His face is pale in the lamplight, features sharp yet almost childlike in sleep. The same man who could terrify the Senate is, at this moment, just a human curled under blankets, perfumed smoke curling around him like a dream. It's almost disarming, this glimpse of fragility. Still, the chamber tells you the truth. He never let go of the stage, not even at night. His sleep was another act, his bedroom another theater. And if you, a quiet intruder, try to slip away without applause, he might have ordered the guard to drag you back just so he could deliver a curtain call. You smile to yourself, amused and a little uneasy. Try bringing this decor home. Purple silk sheets, incense burners in every corner, a cradle for your dog at the foot of the bed, and you'd either impress your friends or make them question your sanity. Maybe both. But in Caligula's world, excess wasn't strange. It was proof of divinity. And so you linger at the edge of that golden bed, the incense tugging at your eyelids, the mirrored walls making you feel watched even in silence. The emperor exhales softly, a pet sighs in its cradle, and the empire itself seems to pause between dreams and nightmares. You step away from Caligula's gilded dreamscape, your hair still scented faintly with incense, your mind buzzing from mirrored paranoia. The corridor ahead feels calmer, almost like the palace itself is exhaling in relief. You slip through a doorway framed not in gold but in polished stone, and suddenly you are in the quieter, stranger world of Claudius. At first glance, the chamber looks more like a scholar's study than an emperor's bedroom. Shelves sag under the weight of scrolls, some stacked haphazardly, others neatly tied with red strings. The smell of parchment, dust, and lamp oil hangs in the air, earthy and oddly comforting. You'd expect the emperor's sleep space to gleam with purple silk or golden carvings. But here, the centerpiece isn't just the bed, it's the clutter that surrounds it. The bed itself is modest compared to his predecessors. The frame is carved wood, sturdy and functional rather than ostentatious. The sheets are wool, dyed in muted hues of green and brown rather than blinding purple. There's a softness to it, a sense that Claudius, awkward and bookish as he was, actually wanted a bed to sleep in, not to perform grandeur. You run your hand across the quilt, thick, slightly rough to the touch, but warm. It's the kind of blanket you'd imagine curling into on a rainy night, far from the political chaos of Rome. On the bedside table, you spot something unusual, a small ceramic bowl, half filled with what looks like warm milk steeped with herbs. Romans often drank spiced milk or wine at night to settle the stomach, and Claudius, famous for his digestive troubles, probably clung to such comforts. Historians still argue whether his illnesses were exaggerated by enemies or whether he genuinely suffered from chronic ailments. Either way, you can almost hear him sighing as he lifted the bowl, searching for relief before drifting into restless dreams. And then, movement. A tiny flash of fur darts across the floor. You look closer and see a cage tucked near the wall. Inside, several small mice rustle around, nibbling grain. Claudius was known for keeping unusual pets, and while stories of him befriending mice may be exaggerated, the image sticks. An emperor of Rome, the mightiest man in the world, leaning down to watch tiny creatures shuffle through their straw. You grin. It's absurd, and yet oddly sweet. The world may have mocked Claudius for his limp, his stammer, his awkwardness, but in the privacy of his chamber, he surrounded himself with things that soothed him, however small. The lamp on the table flickers gently, its bronze casing shaped like a crouching owl. A scholarly touch. Owls were symbols of wisdom, and Claudius saw himself as Rome's unlikely intellectual, the emperor who preferred reading to swordplay. He would spend long hours scratching notes on a wax tablets even at night, composing letters or puzzling through historical records. The bed wasn't just for sleep, it was for scribbling, muttering, rewriting. Imagine him leaning back against his pillow, muttering to himself about Etruscan history, while everyone else in the palace tried to get some rest. You glance at the walls. No golden frescoes, no stars painted on ceilings. Instead, you find murals of simpler scenes, gardens, birds, flowing streams. Peaceful landscapes meant to calm the mind. Romans believed in painting bedrooms with idyllic visions, almost like screensavers for the subconscious. Here, the emperor might close his eyes and imagine himself walking among trees rather than navigating Senate debates. Still, even here, comfort is tinged with unease. Guards linger outside, their sandals scratching faintly. Claudius was considered weak by many, constantly under threat from conspirators. The irony is sharp. The emperor who commanded legions might not have felt safe enough to fall asleep without whispering a prayer first. And yet, compared to Caligula's mirrored paranoia, this room feels almost innocent, like a man trying to build a cocoon of gentleness in a world that mocked him. You notice a curious trinket on the table, a carved amulet shaped like a phallus. Romans believed these charms warded off the evil eye, protecting against curses or bad dreams. A quirky tidbit, but fitting. Imagine Claudius tucking it under his pillow each night, hedging his bets against the jealous mutterings of courtiers. Sleep, after all, was vulnerable time. You couldn't legislate your dreams. Claudius himself appears in your mind's eye now, curled under the quilt, his breathing uneven but steady. He snores a little. Yes, the mighty emperor snoring like anyone else, a human rhythm that cuts through the grandeur of empire. You picture him twitching slightly, maybe muttering phrases from a speech he'll deliver tomorrow, or rolling over and tangling himself in the wool blanket like any tired man who just wants peace. The scrolls on the shelf rustle faintly as a draft slips under the curtain. A guard coughs softly outside. Somewhere in the cage, a mouse squeaks and scampers into the straw. And in the midst of all these tiny domestic sounds, the emperor of Rome dreams, not of conquest or glory, but maybe of quiet gardens, tame pets, and books no one else cared to read. You chuckle. Imagine telling your friends that the greatest comfort of an emperor wasn't gold, but a warm bowl of milk and some pet mice. They'd laugh, but deep down, you realize that's exactly what makes this chamber feel human. Claudius, the overlooked scholar-turned-emperor, wasn't trying to prove his godhood every time he lay down. He was just trying to get comfortable. And as you watch him shift in his sleep, murmuring softly, the thought settles over you like his own wool quilt. Even in the highest halls of empire, sometimes the strangest, simplest comforts are the ones that matter most. You drift from Claudius wool blankets and squeaky little mice, padding softly through a palace passage that feels warmer now, as though firelight itself has seeped into the stones. Ahead, a low hum fills the corridor. Music, laughter, the faint echo of applause. You part another heavy curtain, and suddenly the chamber before you glows as though it belongs to a stage rather than a bedroom. This is Nero's world, where luxury tangled with performance, and sleep never came without theatrics. The room dazzles you at once. The walls gleam with polished panels of marble inlaid with tiny slivers of mother-of-pearl, catching every glint of firelight. Torches blaze in bronze sconces shaped like lyres, their flames flickering across painted scenes of Apollo, god of music, strumming eternally above the emperor's head. The air smells thick, smoke and roses mingling until it's hard to tell whether you're breathing incense or perfume. The bed stands at the center like a stage prop, a vast frame of silver, its posts twisted into spirals, each crowned with a tiny golden mask. Comedy, tragedy, satire, all staring down at whoever lay between them. Draped across it are sheets of silk dyed a deep crimson, shimmering like liquid fire, while a quilt of peacock feather patterns gleams with green and blue threads. You can almost hear the rustle as Nero shifts, as though the fabric itself wants to applaud. At the foot of the bed lies something stranger still, a miniature platform with space for musicians. Yes, musicians. Ancient sources hint that Nero kept performers near him even at night. Imagine drifting into slumber while flutes and lutes play softly, not for the court, not for the people, but for the emperor alone. Historians still argue whether he truly staged nightly concerts in his own bedroom. But when you see the stools, the scattered sheet music, and a lute resting against the wall, you can almost believe it. A silver tray gleams nearby, heavy with half-eaten delicacies. Grapes still cling to their stems, figs glisten with honey, and a dish of oysters lies abandoned, their shells catching torchlight like little mirrors. A quirky tidbit here. Oysters were considered an aphrodisiac, so imagine Nero slurping one down before pulling a velvet quilt over himself. Romance and indigestion in equal measure. You glance upward and gasp. The ceiling itself moves. Panels slide silently to reveal a painted dome, mechanical gears creaking as the roof shifts. Rose petals sprinkle down, drifting lazily into the room, landing on silk sheets, silver trays, and sleeping emperor alike. This was Nero's famous party trick, a device he supposedly used in dining rooms, but the imagination insists on carrying it here, into his most private space. Even sleep, for him, needed special effects. Yet despite the glamour, you sense a shadow beneath it. Mirrors scatter the walls, angled carefully, reflecting torches into endless repetitions of flame. Guards whisper just beyond the doorway, but their presence feels nervous rather than steady. Nero feared betrayal, perhaps more than most. He knew what daggers looked like when they turned toward emperors. You wonder if he ever truly slept, or if he just drifted in and out of half-dreams, ears tuned to the faintest shift of a guard's sandal outside. And still, his vanity clings to every corner. Near the bed lies a stack of wax tablets, scratched with lyrics, half-finished verses, notes for performances. Nero was obsessed with being seen not only as a ruler, but as an artist. You can picture him, reclining in crimson sheets, stylus in hand, murmuring rhymes to himself as though composing lullabies only he would hear. Sleep might catch him mid-line, stylus slipping from his fingers to stain the silk with wax. He lies there now, in your imagination, chest rising under embroidered fabric, curls damp with scented oil, face softened by slumber. The most feared and mocked emperor of Rome, reduced in this moment to a man wrapped in crimson, murmuring faintly as if still rehearsing. Perhaps in his dreams he sings on stage, adored by audiences who never walk out. The room itself seems to sway with his breathing, torchlight flickering as though responding to his pulse. You feel yourself growing drowsy, lulled by the rose-petal air, the whisper of silk, the ghostly echo of flutes. And yet, in the pit of your stomach, unease lingers. Because this isn't just a bedroom, it's a theater, and you're the unwilling audience. You chuckle quietly. Try copying this at home. Sliding ceiling panels, rose petals on demand, background musicians in your bedroom, and you'd have neighbors calling the landlord within a week. But for Nero, extravagance was the baseline. His bedtime comforts weren't really about rest. They were about performance, even if the only audience was himself. As his breathing deepens and the rose petals settle into stillness, you retreat quietly toward the doorway. Behind you, the masks of comedy and tragedy grin down from the silver posts, as if to remind you that even in sleep, Nero never let go of the drama. You slip away from Nero's Crimson Theater, brushing rose petals from your shoulders as you move down a cooler, plainer corridor. The air feels different now, less perfumed, less suffocating. It's as if the palace itself is giving you a break from the sensory overload. Ahead, a chamber door opens with no gilded hinges or incense smoke, just the creak of solid wood. You step inside, and suddenly you're in Vespasian's bedroom, a place of cold stone, soldiers' discipline, and surprising comfort and austerity. At first glance, you almost wonder if you've wandered into a barracks rather than an emperor's quarters. The room is spacious, yes, but not extravagant. The walls are bare stone, smooth but unpainted, carrying only the faint warmth of lamplight. The ceiling arches overhead, sturdy and undecorated, reminding you more of a fortress than a palace. There are no sliding ceilings, no rose-petal contraptions here. Just silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of oil lamps. The bed reflects the same philosophy. A wooden frame, plain and uncarved, fitted with a mattress stuffed with straw and wool. The blanket draped across it is thick but coarse, woven in dark earth tones rather than bright imperial purple. When you run your fingers across it, it scratches slightly against your skin. Not luxurious, but solid, dependable. It's the kind of blanket a man who'd spent decades in military camps might actually find comforting. After years of sleeping under tents with legionaries, a coarse wool quilt probably felt like a royal luxury. On the bedside table, you notice a clay jug filled with water and a simple cup. No silver goblets, no trays of figs and oysters. Just hydration. You almost laugh. An emperor whose bedtime ritual looks suspiciously like your own at home. Still, there's a soldier's wisdom in it. Too much wine before bed meant grogginess at dawn, and Vespasian valued a clear head. A quirky detail catches your eye. A pair of worn boots tucked neatly beside the bed. Who leaves boots in an emperor's chamber? But this was Vespasian's style. Even at night, he wanted reminders of discipline, of soldierly routine. Historians still argue whether he kept such relics of his campaigns for comfort or for symbolism. Either way, you imagine him glancing at those boots before sleep, remembering the muddy roads, the grit of long marches, the camaraderie of soldiers who never saw marble walls. The air in the room smells faintly of olive oil soap, clean and sharp. Romans often bathed before bed, but for Vespasian, ritual baths were less about perfume and more about hygiene. You picture him scrubbing down quickly, wrapping himself in a rough towel, muttering to himself about the day's accounts. Because here's another quirk. Vespasian had a famously thrifty streak. He counted coins carefully, even joked about collecting taxes from public toilets. Imagine him settling in a bed at night, tallying grain shipments, or mentally calculating how many denarii could be saved by cutting back on luxuries. Still, the room isn't entirely devoid of warmth. On a small shelf, you notice clay lamps carved with simple images, wheat sheaves, vines, symbols of plenty. Household gods, perhaps. Vespasian was practical, but he wasn't immune to tradition. Before bed, he may have whispered a small prayer to Laras, the household spirits, asking for protection over the night. After all, emperors were just as vulnerable in sleep as anyone else. He lies there now, in your imagination, shoulders broad, posture stiff, even as his breathing slows under the scratchy quilt. His hair is silvering, his face weathered, but there's a calmness about him. Unlike Caligula or Nero, who stage their bedrooms as theaters. Vespasian seems to treat his chamber as exactly what it is, a place to rest, nothing more. And yet, even in that rest, you can feel the weight of empire pressing down, because his version of comfort is control. Simplicity is safety. You notice a wax tablet on the bedside stand, faintly scratched with numbers. Accounts, records, maybe a quick note about taxes collected that day. Who else but Vespasian would treat bedtime like bookkeeping hour? You chuckle softly, imagining him dozing off mid-equation, stylus slipping from his fingers, only to be found in the morning with smudges of wax on his hand. And still, despite the plainness, the room has its own kind of beauty. The flicker of lamplight against the stone makes soft golden patterns. The silence hums like a lullaby after the chaos of Caligula's incense and Nero's music. There's something almost monastic here, an emperor who found peace not in extravagance, but in discipline. You smile, realizing that if you tried copying this decor at home, plain stone walls, rough blankets, water jug by the bed, you might be accused of being minimalist before minimalism was trendy. But there's a comfort in it, a reminder that sometimes less really is more, especially when the rest of your waking hours are spent ruling the known world. As Vespasian's breathing steadies and the lamplight flickers low, you sense the calm of a man who knows tomorrow will be another long march through politics and empire. Tonight, though, he lets the cold stone cradle him, the scratchy wool warm him, and the silence of discipline rock him towards sleep. You move quietly out of Vespasian's stone-walled haven, feeling as if you've walked from a monk's cell into a maze of shadows. The corridors of the Palatine stretch again, and the air grows warmer, heavier. By now, you've realized each emperor's bedroom is like a fingerprint, some gaudy, some austere, each betraying quirks they probably never wanted the world to notice. Tonight, the next door swings open into the reign of Domitian, Vespasian's son, and the contrast is immediate. Where his father loved soldierly plainness, Domitian built a fortress of paranoia. At first, you think you've stepped into a military bunker rather than a bedroom. The walls here are thick, almost suffocating, and lined with polished marble that gleams like a mirror in the lamplight. That's no accident. Domitian was famously distrustful, and rumor had it he liked reflective surfaces so he could catch assassins sneaking up behind him. Even in bed, he wanted eyes in every direction. Imagine trying to fall asleep while a shiny wall practically whispers, "Hey, someone might stab you tonight." Comforting, right? The bed itself is surprisingly low, closer to the floor than the lofty frames you've seen before. Draped in heavy purple cloth, the kind that screams imperial authority, it still feels defensive, like he could roll out and grab a sword in one quick motion. And yes, you notice the sword itself, lying within arm's reach on a small bronze table. Not decorative, either. You can tell from a worn grip that it was handled often. This wasn't a theatrical prop. For Domitian, bedtime was combat readiness. You pause and tilt your head, noticing the ceiling. A curious grid pattern runs across it, wooden beams intersecting at sharp angles. Historians still argue whether this was aesthetic or strategic. Some say he had the beams carved to break up shadows, making it harder for anyone to hide above him. Others believe it was just architectural style. Either way, you catch yourself staring, realizing how much thought this emperor poured into the very geometry of his paranoia. There are comforts here, yes, but they're always edged with caution. A brazier glows in the corner, the coals throwing off steady warmth, but beside it lies a bucket of sand, ready to douse the fire instantly. The fragrance in the air isn't flowery incense, but sharp resin, pine tar, maybe, used not just for scent, but as a disinfectant. Domitian liked order, cleanliness, and control. You suspect he wanted even the air he breathed at night to feel sterilized. One quirky detail pulls your attention to the foot of the bed, a small wooden chest with children's toys inside. Strange, in a room so grim. Wooden dolls, little carved animals, a ball of worn leather. Scholars speculate whether these belong to his deceased son, or if he simply kept them as a morbid reminder of family legacy. Imagine being an emperor, surrounded by soldiers and servants, but choosing to keep your child's rattles within reach as you try to sleep. It makes the fortress of paranoia feel painfully human. Still, His daily bedtime routine didn't help soften the edge. Ancient writers describe him pacing the room before lying down, muttering to himself, sometimes dictating lines of poetry or decrees to scribes who had to stand awkwardly in the corner. You picture those poor secretaries fighting yawns while their emperor, barefoot in his night tunic, paced like a caged lion under lamplight. The strangest comfort here is the soundproofing. Thick rugs and tapestries, dark and heavy, swallow every sound. Even your own footsteps feel muffled. Domitian despised noise at night. No music, no chatter, no clinking goblets. Silence was his lullaby. But it's the kind of silence that presses against your ears, almost eerie, making you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat. Maybe he thought it made him safer. Or maybe it just amplified the anxieties rattling in his skull. On the wall above the bed hangs a bronze relief of Minerva, goddess of wisdom and war. She was Domitian's patron deity, his imaginary bodyguard. He supposedly prayed to her nightly, convinced she alone kept daggers away in the dark. You can almost see him now, lying on his side, staring up at Minerva's stern face, whispering appeals to her like a child clinging to a nightlight. It's endearing and unsettling at once. The scent of the room shifts as the brazier dies lower, smoke curling like ghostly fingers against the marble. You imagine Domitian clutching his blanket, not soft wool this time, but a thick fabric laced with embroidery of laurel leaves, drawing it tight against himself. He was emperor of Rome, yet he slept like a soldier trapped in hostile territory, ears straining for phantom assassins. Historians still debate whether his fears were justified paranoia or grounded in real conspiracies. But you can't help thinking, if every bedtime feels like preparing for battle, how much rest can you ever really get? And yet, despite the unease, you spot a softer side again in the corner. A bowl of fresh fruit, figs and dates mostly, left within arm's reach. Midnight snack? Or just another comfort? Simple, grounding sweet? You smile, picturing Rome's most paranoid emperor sitting up at 2 a.m, sword in one hand, fig in the other, chewing nervously while staring at his own reflection in the marble wall. It's the kind of absurd image that almost makes him sympathetic. As your gaze drifts one last time around the room, you realize how exhausting this space feels. The silence is too thick, the defense is too obvious. You long for the scratchy blanket and olive oil soap of Vespasian's chamber again. But Domitian lies still now, his eyes closed beneath Minerva's stern gaze, his breathing shallow but steady. He has built a fortress against the night, even if it never truly keeps the nightmares out. You drift onward, as though the marble corridors themselves are nudging you away from Domitian's claustrophobic fortress. His silence clings to you for a few steps, but then, as another door opens, the air softens, lighter, sweeter, more playful. You've crossed into the domain of Hadrian, and if Domitian's bedroom was a bunker, this one is more like an artist's retreat crossed with a philosopher's studio. You almost exhale in relief. The first thing you notice is light. Not blazing, not harsh, but a carefully engineered shimmer. Hadrian was a man obsessed with design, a tinkerer of spaces, and his bedroom reflects it. Lamps are positioned so the glow bounces off polished alabaster panels, scattering a gentle radiance that never throws deep shadows. For someone who spent his reign building monuments in cities, he seems to have made even his bedchamber into a miniature experiment in architecture. You find yourself squinting, not from brightness, but from the uncanny perfection of it. The place feels staged, like a theater set where sleep was only one of several acts. And then the fabrics. Gone are Domitian's heavy, suffocating drapes. Here the bed is surrounded by gauzy curtains, dyed in soft blues and greens, colors that call to mind distant seas. You remember that Hadrian adored travel. He practically lived outside Rome, touring provinces endlessly, and it shows in his sleeping space. The bed itself is carved with motifs from Egypt, little lotus blossoms, and falcons etched into the wood. Yet the blanket is woven in a Greek pattern, a clear nod to the culture he revered. It's like his subconscious couldn't pick one favorite country, so he smuggled them all into his decor. One mainstream fact floats into memory. Hadrian was responsible for constructing Hadrian's Wall in Britain, that great defensive line slicing across the island. But here, Inside his private quarters, the only walls are decorative, tapestries embroidered with landscapes he visited. One shows the Nile curling past temples, another the hills of Greece dotted with olive trees. It's as if he couldn't stop sightseeing even when his eyes were closed. But the quirkiest object catches your attention at the foot of the bed, a small bronze bust of Antinous, his beloved companion. Hadrian's grief for Antinous, who drowned mysteriously in the Nile, shaped his later years. Some historians still argue whether the young man was sacrificed, fell accidentally, or offered himself deliberately. Whatever the truth, Hadrian turned his mourning into obsession, founding cities and cults in Antinous' honor. And here, in the hush of the bedroom, you see that grief crystallized. The bust's smooth features gaze outward as if to guard his dreams. Imagine drifting off every night with the bronze face of your lost love keeping watch. It's tender and heartbreaking. The air here is fragrant, but not with the medicinal sharpness of Domitian's pine. Instead, it's honeyed, amber resin burning slowly in a small dish, releasing a perfume that clings to your skin. There's also a faint tang of wine. On a side table, you spot a goblet half full, beside a plate of cheese and bread. Clearly, Hadrian indulged in bedtime snacks, but it feels less nervous and more celebratory than Domitian's figs. You can almost hear him chuckling softly as he tears bread, quoting a Greek philosopher to no one in particular before curling back beneath the gauzy sheets. Hadrian's routines were just as unusual. Writers claim he often read aloud to himself before bed, sometimes poetry, sometimes architectural treatises. You picture him in a loose linen tunic, pacing barefoot across mosaic tiles, reciting Homer in Greek with a slightly tipsy sway. Servants likely sat nearby, rolling their eyes, wondering when the emperor would finally call a night. But Hadrian wasn't the kind of man who believed in silence before sleep. He liked sound, rhythm, and words filling the air, as though the music of language itself could rock him unconscious. One detail nearly hidden in a corner makes you grin. A cage with two small birds, finches maybe. They flutter softly, feathers rustling, and you realize he even brought nature inside to lull him. Historians still argue whether Hadrian was imitating Greek philosophers, many of whom valued the presence of animals in their study, or whether he just liked the company. Either way, the idea of Rome's supreme ruler snoozing to the chirp of pet birds is too charming to ignore. There's also a quirk of architecture, a shallow pool, no bigger than a bathtub, sunk into the corner of the chamber. Its surface glimmers, reflecting the lamplight like liquid glass. Was it for bathing, cooling his feet, or just another experiment in design, the emperor wanting water always near? You lean closer and smell the faint mineral tang. Maybe it reminded him of the Nile, or of Greek fountains, soothing him with echoes of places he longed to see again. But as restful as this room feels, there's an undertone of melancholy. You keep circling back to that bronze bust, to the way the space seems curated not just for comfort, but for memory. The tapestries, the birds, the pool, they're all pieces of his wanderlust, pinned down in one room. It's as if he tried to trap the whole world within his walls because he couldn't stay still long enough to rest otherwise. And yet, when you glance at the bed once more, you can picture him there, finally surrendering. He lies on his side, fingers curled loosely near Antinous' likeness, amber smoke curling over him like a soft blanket. Perhaps he whispers a few last lines of Greek verse before drifting off, the birds settling their feathers in sympathetic hush. The room hums with gentle beauty, a far cry from the armored paranoia you just left behind. You stretch, realizing that Hadrian's bedroom doesn't make you feel like an intruder in a fortress. It feels instead like a guest in a private museum of one man's obsessions: travel, art, philosophy, love. You leave reluctantly, the honeyed perfume still clinging to your hair, a reminder that even emperors found comfort not only in power, but in the fragile rituals of memory. Still, it's refreshing to consider that these figures, lionized in marble, were nervous night owls too. The quirks pile up. Some emperors had talismans tucked under their pillows, tiny figurines of gods, protective amulets, or lucky charms. There's record of charms made from amber beads to ward off nightmares. You can picture a mighty emperor fumbling under his sheets, making sure his little carved Mercury is still there. We may laugh, but how different is that from someone today double-checking that their phone is charging right beside them before drifting off? Ancient power, modern habits, yes. You think back to other odd comforts we passed earlier. Remember the crocodile dung, sunscreen, whispered about in Alexandria? Someone, somewhere, definitely tried it. Or Domitian's mirrored ceiling, letting him see behind his head like a paranoid owl? Those are luxuries bent toward worry, not peace. Here in the final bedroom, though, you sense a stripping away. Power is exhausting, and even emperors eventually want to stop performing. You imagine Commodus after his circus games, still buzzing from pretending to be Hercules, finally collapsing here with muscles sore and ego inflated, the bed groaning louder than the Senate's complaints. You imagine Hadrian, older and sick, using a fan to draw a cooler breeze through the curtains, exhaling relief when the night air brushed his forehead. These little images take the colossal myths and tuck them into bedsheets. The scholarly debate keeps humming in the background, because historians still wonder how insulated emperors were. Did they genuinely get to sleep undisturbed? Or did fear make every creak of the floorboard sound like a dagger unsheathed? Roman historians were often gossips, recording dreams, portents, or sleepless nights as omens of imperial doom. Nero, for example, supposedly had nightmares so vivid that he begged magicians to chant away the spirits haunting him. Some called it divine punishment. Others chalked it up to an overactive imagination fueled by too much wine. Maybe it was just bad cheese. Either way, the emperor's comfort wasn't guaranteed by silk sheets. It depended on a quieter mind, which very few emperors ever had. There's a strange democracy in that. Whether you're a baker in Subura or emperor on the Palatine, insomnia will level the playing field. And perhaps that's why walking through this final space feels oddly grounding. You can almost hear the rustle of sheets, the muttered prayers, the shuffle of a slave adjusting lamps before retreating. You notice how thin the walls must have been, because ancient builders weren't thinking about soundproofing. Outside, a fountain splashes, a guard coughs, an owl calls across the Forum Valley. Inside, the emperor rolls onto his side, tugging covers, trying to forget for just a few hours that the empire could crumble tomorrow. There's a strange, almost tender comedy in it. Imagine the emperor drooling on his pillow, the most powerful man in the known world, undone not by enemies but by gravity and gravity's best friend, sleep. The idea settles into you. Comfort isn't in marble, it's in the ordinary rituals. Washing your feet, whispering a line of poetry, checking your charm one last time, breathing deep as the lamp burns down. Maybe emperors weren't so different from us after all. Sure, they had courtyards filled with statues, but when it came time for the last act of the day, they needed the same small mercies you do. A dark room, a little quiet, a hope for dreams without politics. That realization is your third and gentlest joke. If you've ever kicked the blanket off in summer heat, congratulations. You've lived like a Roman emperor, minus the assassination attempts. Probably. You let your body sink into the thought. These final chambers teach you more than the glittering halls did. They remind you that history is not just power and war, but also bedtime. It's restless sighs, whispered meditations, absurd requests for seashells, and philosophers scribbling by lamplight. It's emperors pressing lucky charms under their palms, just as you might clutch your pillow tighter against the world. You leave them here, at rest, while outside. The lamp sputters once, then steadies. You breathe with it. The tour is complete. You've seen the strange comforts of Roman emperors' bedrooms, and you've discovered that in the end, they were fragile sleepers like us. History softens when it's wrapped in blankets. So you turn to go, closing the curtains softly, leaving them to rest in their modest, imperfect comfort. And maybe, as you lie down yourself tonight, you'll remember that even emperors found peace not in marble, but in the ordinary drift of dreams. The empire survives one more night, and so do you. You slip quietly into what feels like the last chamber of this long wandering, and it doesn't try to overwhelm you with marble or blinding mosaics. By now, your eyes expect sparkle, some golden bed frame, maybe a jewel-studded nightstand. Instead, what you find is a kind of pareback hush. The air is cooler, the floor quieter under your steps. It seems the emperors, for all their posturing and pomp outside these walls, wanted their final retreat to be somewhere the noise of senators, soldiers, and scheming rivals couldn't intrude. A bedroom where the curtain is drawn, the oil lamp hums, and the rest of the world doesn't matter. For the first time, you're not dazzled. You're just invited to slow down, to breathe, to imagine yourself lying where an emperor once lay, wondering whether tomorrow's sunrise would bring loyalty or betrayal. There's a strange comfort in noticing how ordinary these last spaces often were. Historical sources remind us that emperors' private rooms in the Palatine Palace weren't endless ballrooms. Many were fairly simple. Suetonius and Cassius Dio give glimpses of chambers not stuffed with gold, but with simple couches, some tapestries, and a bed that wouldn't look too foreign in a well-off senator's house. The grandeur was meant for the audience chambers. In here, the power brokers slipped off their sandals and sighed like anyone else. You realize, ironically, that the man who could command entire legions might have slept under covers more modest than your grandmother's guest quilt. And maybe that's the first real comfort. Emperors, too, had to submit to the very unimperial need to shut their eyes and snore. Speaking of snoring, imagine the awkwardness. Domitian, paranoid as he was, might have startled awake at his own thunderous inhale, convinced assassins were sneaking through the curtains. It's easy to picture a guard tiptoeing outside, rolling his eyes. Relax, Caesar. It was just you. You can't buy a peaceful night with a treasury full of silver. You just hope your partner doesn't shove you for hogging the blanket. Historians still argue whether emperors actually lived in lavish nightly comfort or whether they were deliberately more austere to project discipline. The archaeological record suggests both. Some villas reveal decadent fountains burbling right beside sleeping quarters, while others show only simple bedding and wood. Perhaps it depended on the ruler. Some, like Hadrian, had a poet's soul and valued quiet gardens outside their rooms. Others, like Caligula, he supposedly ordered his guards to fetch seashells at night, as if Neptune's treasures were necessary bedtime toys. Try explaining that at 3 a.m. when your boss wakes you. Sorry, soldiers, I urgently need 50 clams. If that sounds ridiculous, it is, but it also makes them human. You've been traveling through corridors where ceilings collapsed and plaster cracked, and you realize every flickering lamp here once burned for someone restless, someone anxious. Imagine Augustus, praised for bringing peace, pacing because peace never lasts. Or Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, scribbling his meditations not in some lofty study, but quite possibly while leaning against his bed frame, trying to steady his mind before sleep. He whispers notes to himself about mortality, about kindness, about not being rattled by fools at court. Basically a second-century version of journaling before bed. If he had an app, he'd have called it Commas Aurelius. Joke number 2, but fair warning. That one so dry it could put you to sleep by itself.